Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to wrap up this week with an album review, going through an entire album track by track, exploring what each song is doing in isolation and it's part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at an album I've been looking forward to for an incredibly long time, and I had kind of hoped we had checked it out prior to last week before, something like that, as OK Goodnight has put out an album this year, but I wanted to check this one out before getting to that one. I just like doing things in order. I don't know, it just makes sense to me. So I'm excited to finally dive into this. I've been wanting to listen to this for a while now. We have OK Goodnight's The Fox and the Bird. 13 tracks, 51 minutes. We have we have one featured artist, Elizabeth Hull from Atomic Guava fame, on a couple of the tracks. Otherwise, though, it looks like a majority of this is just OK Goodnight. We have listened to one of these tracks before, track 9, The Bear, featuring Elizabeth Hull. That was, like 2.5 years ago. That song absolutely sold me on what this album could be, and that might have been the point when I wanted to dive into it. Anyways, let's kick this off. We have the first track, The Drought.
Dear son, why do you desiccate this heart? Bleeding dry, no blessing sent down in disguise. Oh, death, why is it here that you reside in? Just and train all the color as you drink the rest.
All right. Yeah, solid start to this album. We have some cool rhythmic stuff, we have some cool sonic stuff, we have powerful vocals, we have variation on that vocal melody. In fact, the entire track is just variation and iteration on the original We have our A section and then the revamped fuller version of the A section. And it's just fun. I sense a heaviness in it. I think some of that might just come from the guitar tones in here, the heavier drumming. A lot of the other OK Goodnight tracks that I've heard are rockier, and I knew this one was going to be more metallic if it was based off of The Bear, which was a fairly heavy track and quite surprised me when we checked that single out a couple of years back because it was so much heavier than I had heard them previously. But that heaviness does come at this track and brings weight within a song that I think generally is optimistic, maybe. When I listen to the chord progressions, when I listen to the vocals, there is, especially on that second set of vocals, a second stanza, there is all of this power. There's projection to it. It's strength in its delivery. And the notes chosen are ones of strength, of power, of upward growth, to pull oneself out from a low point is what I get out of that track, or out of that vocal work. Interestingly, I don't really know what I get out of the instruments. There's a bit of positivity in there, but there's also so many just interesting sounds in general that make it sound more fun than maybe harmonically it's aiming for. There's a springiness to the guitar, there's a twinkling to the keyboard work, the drums are light and syncopated. There's just a lot of levity within the sonic side of this track that I'm not sure if it is embellished by or restrained by the harmonic information. That just felt a bit more, I don't know, maybe neutral to me. But I really enjoyed this as like a soft introduction to something that presumably is going to get more progressive. Right off the bat, we had some really interesting rhythmic devices. The drums are syncopated across this entire thing, and it is really fun to listen to. We have some chords in here that certainly sit within a rockier or metallic sound in general, but lean into more progressive sounds, chords that aren't what you would find in standard fare metal, pulling from jazz. I guess for this one, it's very jazz fusiony. So I don't think I would be surprised if we explored other influences harmonically throughout this album, but this one I think is pretty well seated within a jazz rock combo. And then again, we have all of the interesting sounds in here too, from the piano, from the guitar. So it's a track that is certainly a hard rock, a light metal at its core, but that's not where its influences stop. And I'd even say that once we take in the perspective of the vocals, we'll certainly find something that is beyond rock, beyond metal, particularly because they're all clean. And I'm going to assume this album is all clean because I don't think the vocalist does harsh vocals. I do know The Bear has some from when we checked that track out, but I'm pretty sure Elizabeth, the featured vocalist, was the one who contributed those. So it's going to be metal with clean vocals throughout the album. And it's also very catchy, though. Very poppy, very bright. Again, also well projected and incredibly in tune consistently. It's just phenomenal, like vocal trained or maybe academically trained vocalist singing these powerhouse lyrics or vocal lines. And yeah, that just stands out to me as some elements that kind of deviates away from like a core metal sound. I think though that the metric side is certainly the more exploratory here, as we have a lot of metric modulation going on and syncopated strikes against the backbeat where our accent points just aren't usually on the downbeat. There's a lot of playfulness there. Even though it is consistently in 4/4, sometimes it feels like it tries to escape that and cannot. And that's about it. It's a pretty solid opening track. Pretty straightforward. We have the A and the B section, we have instrumental and then vocals, and then instrumentals and then bigger vocals, this big finale, and then that fades out into nothing. So I'm going to assume other tracks are, oh, wow. I hadn't quite looked at this. I did see that it was 13 tracks, and I think I mentioned it was 51 minutes earlier, but that connection didn't quite hit me yet, where 13 tracks is a lot to cram into 5 minutes. Most of these songs are in the 3 to 4 minute range, quite a bit shorter. We have a couple of 5s, we have a 6, but we have several 3s, a couple of 2s. All right, so progressive metal, but not Dream Theater. But certainly on the more palatable side of metal, much like Dream Theater would be, but jazzier instead of pure metric stuff. I don't know. We'll continue on. Let's hit some lyrics and then we'll dive into the next track and see where they take us. Pretty straightforward lyrics as well. Our 2 verses first speak to the sun and then speak to death. Each verse takes 2 lines for each. The sun has desiccated this land, bled it dry, left it scorned. There's no blessing sent down in disguise. There's no positive elements to this. It asks death, why do you reside here? Why is this a place that you adorn? You've drained all of our water and there's no fruit left. For a track called The Drought, that makes sense. So we just have an intense heat going on here and no water. So then we're going to look at the track, The Fox and the Bird. Let's dive in. Beautiful, almost whimsical right from the start. The acoustic guitar keeps it rooted in a way that the previous track wasn't. Very green hills and sunshine. Very light and effortless 4/4. And airiness in the vocals. A very thin falsetto through that. Huge contrast from the previous track's powerful vocal delivery. Got those dotted quarter note progression, just beautiful.
Whistle in the air, his wings grew thin. His spirit didn't care. A warm talk with words unspoken. Scorching sun and infatuated wind. The
the twinkling outside of this. The conversation back and forth between the two pan guitars. Using the vocals to sound like forest noises, bird calls.
Shall we stay inside our shell as the reaper takes his prey? Oh, the world will only darken without candlelight. With you, I think I'll try.
That's a fun rhythm. I do want to go back though, just for a brief moment. I'm going to pull up the second chorus, I hope. I want to hear if there are vocal harmonies here the same way that they were in that final chorus.
Don't let go with words.
Here we go.
Shall we stay inside our shell as the reaper takes his prey?
Kind of.
The world will only darken without candlelight.
Okay, so most of the harmony going on here, I believe, is the lead singer singing the second tracks, the harmonized tracks. I'm going to pull up this final chorus though, and there's a second vocalist here. I thought this was pretty interesting.
Shall we stay inside our shell?
The lower vocal there.
The reaper takes his prey.
Listen on this line.
Oh, the world will only darken without candlelight. With you.
I didn't think I had heard that second vocalist earlier. That harmony sounded new to me, and it came right after I talked about the two guitars being in conversation with each other during that instrumental bridge between our second and third chorus. That's a very cool detail. I mean, it is called The Fox and the Bird. I'm going to assume that there is a fox and a bird talking to each other here. We'll see other animals on this journey as well. The next track is the raccoon, but we also see the snake, the falcon, the bear, the crocodile, and then the bird on its own. Track 11 is just the bird. I wonder what happens to the fox then. We do see some inanimate stuff as well. The concept of the journey, the nightmare, but also the mountain and the rain. So this is going to be interesting. I mean, we have a drought that starts off the album and a rain that ends it. We have a journey, a nightmare, a dream, a mountain, which would be a hurdle or a peak, which is the penultimate track. So the mountain being the peak makes sense there. And then a bunch of animals along the way. So I wonder if we are going on a journey. Regardless, this idea of conversation, of instruments being intertwined with one another, whether it is call and response like we saw in the guitars in the bridge, or the new harmonies that we heard at the end of the track in the final chorus, there is a dual voice element to this song, at least the final minute and a half or so of this track, that seems to line up with our dual perspective or dual protagonists here, at least in the title, assuming that, maybe it's not going in this direction at all. Maybe it's a narrator thing. And the narrator is going to describe the fox and the bird. But seeing as the drought was in first person rather than an omniscient third person, I'm kind of banking on this being from the perspective of someone, at least. Some animal, something. we'll keep going through on this. When we get to the lyrics, though, we'll see if anything in there lines up with this sort of duality or partnership, maybe, or conversation. Maybe they're, at each other's throats. Maybe they're attacking. I don't know. I don't think it is, though, because this whole vibe is chill. Super chill, dude. This is a very laid back track, especially coming off of the Drought. It's what I think makes the bridge so interesting because we do kind of veer back into that metallic sound again. We bring in a darkness and a weight, a general size and ominous emotion into the fray again, but it is quickly diminished as we head right back to the acoustic guitars, the levity, and then the final chorus, as whimsical and light as that is. And whimsical is a really good track. I mean, a really good description for this track. It is very whimsical. There is something magical about the instrumental tones. We have a lot of bells in here. We have brighter plucked guitars. We do have some warmth from the main acoustic guitar, primarily playing the lower notes, giving us those chords for our harmonic work, but there's also some brighter guitars that are played monophonically, just one note at a time. They're usually on the outsides, lots of rising and falling arpeggiation work. There's also some, I don't know, piano, probably from their keyboardist. It's giving us these brighter key tones too. It is just very vibrant and magical. And I love that. It feels like walking into a forest in a Disney cartoon. And maybe some of that is also from the animal names in all the titles, and I'm kind of picturing them talking to each other, and talking anthropomorphic animals is just very Disney coded. So that could certainly be influencing my interpretation of this. But the music is certainly leaning in that direction too. There's something magical about this from the very first bar. Drastic change from the last track, and I really like that. The Drought is this darkness. It's a danger. It's going to hurt this entire ecosystem, all the animals here. But for a moment, we're not worried about that. If we kind of come back to this Disney idea, it's like being introduced to the villain. Now the audience, particularly probably the kids, know who to root against, but we go back to maybe an Act 1 form of our protagonists. They're carefree. They don't know dangers on the horizon. They're just having fun. That's what this feels like. I really enjoy that. It sets things up really nicely to show how idyllic this world is right now, or this forest, or wherever we are, and kind of sets up the danger that will be encroaching upon it. This is, what is that? Situational irony? Where the audience knows something that the characters don't. Anyways, it's really good writing, and they've injected it right here to the beginning of this track. I assume that this Drought is slowly going to affect the fox and the bird, but it hasn't quite affected them yet, unless that's what the bridge was supposed to represent, in which case I kind of wish they had stuck with that to create some permanence in that vibe. We'll get to the lyrics later and see what the story is. Everything about this track, though, as I mentioned, is lighter, and it's not just the instruments, the instruments that are used, their timbres all being brighter, but also the vocals. There's something incredibly poppy about this track, and one of the first things I thought of while getting through, I think it was the first chorus, which is where we really got to hear this light, almost ephemeral head voice from the vocalist, was what if Paramore but indie folk? And that ended up being really accurate as of a description for me to sort of shorthand my understanding of this track. There's just a beauty, but still a poppy catchiness to the vocal melodies in this song. And they are not really juxtaposed, but supported by a really light and airy, fun, the opposite of dangerous, like incredibly safe sound. And it's just incredibly gorgeous to listen to. From the very first chords we heard, to the vocals coming in, to the bells and shimmering sounds all over the place. It's just a very serene atmosphere. Even when we look at some of the rhythmic devices, the last track was quite syncopated, very playful. We had metric modulation in there. The only metric mod we really had in here was a shift to the dotted quarter idea that well, it kind of sits hidden within the chorus, but it certainly punctuates the end of the chorus as we focus heavy on that and use the chord progression to kind of tie us back into that second verse. I don't remember if this happened moving into the bridge or not, but it was certainly there at the end of the first chorus. And really, I mean, it's so rarely used on this track. Everything about this is supposed to be easily digestible and palatable because it's creating these feelings of serenity. You're not supposed to feel out of place. You're not supposed to feel unbalanced or off kilter. The opening track did that. This is not a place that's supposed to be devoid of water, and it is. And so the music kind of introduces some rhythmic devices that are constantly in flux. You can't ever really get your footing. This place is not the way it should be. But the second track is. You're invited here. This is a cool, calm, collected area. And it's just, it's beautiful. And so we see less of that metric stuff in here. It's really interesting seeing this album swing so wide right out of the gate. 6 minutes in, I guess technically like 7 minutes in. And we've already seen two wild extremes. I'm really curious where the rest is going to take us. Let's hit some lyrics. And once again, fairly straightforward lyrics. I wonder if the shorter runtime of all these tracks is going to lend itself well to continuing on with this more traditional structure. A, B, A, B, C, B. 2 verses, 2 choruses, and then hitting the chorus at the end of the track too. Each of these stanzas is only 4 lines each, and since 3 of the 5 stanzas are choruses, we only have 3 unique stanzas here. 12 lines total. There's just not a lot to dive into, and it is incredibly surface level. It is designed almost as a narrative description rather than a poetic one. There's not a lot of metaphor in the overarching idea. That's not to say there's zero figurative language in here at all, but that the main idea is quite understood as directly spoken to the audience. Verse 1 talks about a fox, a stiff coat of amber hues that's tired, feet turning gray from the dust, walking home on a vermilion path. Verse 2 talks about the bird, wings growing thin, but his spirit didn't care. There was a dauntless whistle in the air. The chorus says, "Shall we stay inside our shells? As the reaper takes his prey, the world only darken without candlelight. With you, I think I'll try to get to the other side." So we have these 2 creatures affected by the drought, presumably. We have a tired, stiff coat, so it isn't as soft as it would be if it was not malnourished. And then the bird has thin wings. Their muscles are beginning to shrink as they're not getting the nourishment they need either. And the chorus basically says, if we band together, we might be able to create a light in this darkness, to be a force of good against this danger. Maybe we can find a way to the other side of this drought together where we wouldn't be able to do that alone. So my idea was, I had the right read on the music. I don't think there's any way to listen to this and think, yeah, dude, this song is dangerous. Like, it's obviously going for a type of serenity and just sheer beauty. But the song, I kind of assumed it was going to be, look at this place before the drought, and then the bridge was the drought, starting to affect the area. But that's not it at all. Both of the animals we're introduced here are already affected by the drought. So I find the music really interesting, that I don't know what it's attempting to characterize other than maybe these 2 characters themselves, that despite their situation that they are in, they are still finding strength. They're still finding connection. They're still finding ways to push forward. And through that, they are this light. They are this beauty that can exist within a darkened world. One destroyed by this drought. It does make me wonder about the bridge, though. But I don't think there's anything in the music that would allude to why we went to that metal side there. But I do think that the conversational elements after the second chorus and the harmonies in the final chorus certainly represent that the fox and the bird are communicating with each other and eventually decide to team up. All right, the next one's called The Raccoon and the Myth. The myth is in parentheses, though. It's the only title that has anything in parentheses. I'm curious what that means. Let's dive in. Ooh.
Blissful glow under a willow tree. Kindness flows from a golden revelry. It speaks in tones of forebearers long forgotten, humble ones that tell us to prepare for what's to come.
Yeah. Oh, actually, no. There's the reset.
Stories laying in the roots around him, tales that quilt, the thread preserved in mystery. Are welcome here. Face creased like the rotten wood. Do not fear. He says it's though we senses we're afraid. Our home will die unless we find a way. He then begins to speak his mind, a legend lost from weary times, a secret song unearthed before our eyes. I heard a story long ago of spirits found in heaven's snow, atop a mountain far above the skies. These spirits pure as light could bring an endless flow of water.
A bass that you can feel,
back
too.
to places cursed with death and waste. In order to restore this life, it
So much
wouldn't
sub-bass
come
on this track.
without a price, a set of totems the spirits do require. The skin of a limbless ghoul, the feather of a winged fool, a trickster fit with pride that's bound to fall. The tooth of a putrid brood, the sharpest minds he can pollute, and last a creature foul as death himself. The claw of a murderous beast, starving for a holy feast, a bitterness untamed by nature's hand. But who journeys so far, face the dangers and take on such perilous scars? The fox and bird look to each other's eyes, without a question knew they had to risk it all and try.
I'll tell you, the soundscape of this, the instruments chosen, beautiful melody here. It's not really escaping the Disney comparisons, and I'm here for it.
Forward they went as faces met with shock, knowing the restless spirits that hunt among the path they'd walk. Though their lives may be lost along the way, it'd be worth it all to save the home they knew deserved to stay.
Oh, dude. Okay, no, we've got to stop. We got to talk about this. I was thinking, I was like, man, maybe I should just let it go. It's the first track that rolls over into the next, but I've already stopped it. Might as well take the opportunity and talk about the Raccoon while it's fresh in my mind. Yeah, they're not really escaping my earlier Disney comparisons. There's a lot of parallels I can see here that are similar to Disney musical pieces, which tend to blur the lines of popular music and romantic era classical. There's a heavy focus on emotion and using more chords than popular music typically uses within the era, and finding the right chords, chord progressions, and melodies, the right notes to play on top of the chords to further expand the emotional information there, to portray very specific ideas, very specific emotions, not just beauty, not just sorrow, not just anger, but nuanced interpretations of these. And I think that's what I love about this song in particular. The Fox and the Bird was very heavy-handed, I would say, in its hyper focus on serenity and beauty, basically not allowing any harsh edges or rough surfaces on that track at all, other than that little dip in the bridge. This track is a bit more nuanced in its harmonic language, and I found that I really enjoyed this. In fact, I'm enjoying this album so much already simply because it is as melodic and gorgeous and harmonically interesting as it is. Right from the start of this track, we can already hear some sort of sorrow. There's a darkness here, but it isn't straightforward melancholy. It certainly isn't grief. I'm not sure what it is. This is where the nuance comes in, and it's the case where that makes this a really good album, that you can't get it all on a first time listen. It's certainly going to be something that opens itself up to the listener with repeat exposure. And it's going to take a while to fully get everything, if you ever reach that point. I mean, there's certainly some albums I listen to hundreds, thousands of times, and I'm still finding new things in them. And I'm sure this album will end up being in that same area for me. But there is a heaviness, a weight. And in fact, that's what I think it is. It's a heaviness on the heart, emotional turmoil, a pain, maybe of knowing what's to come. Maybe it's the burden of knowing the future and being unable to change it. I don't know. There is some sort of emotional weight here, though. I said it's not sorrow, but it is heaviness. It drags the listener, or it drags the vocalist down. It tries to pull them down with them. And there are certainly some vocal lines in here where the music sounds like it begins to push into sorrow. In fact, it would not have surprised me if the vocalist ever kind of broke that more traditional vocal style and maybe incorporated a little sob a couple of times. They never did, but it would have felt right in some cases of this track if the vocalist chose to do that. They were magnificently leaning into that direction of almost this all-encompassing pain where the only thing you can do is cry. The song never sits in these ideas for too long, though. It tends to pull back out of them and explore something a little brighter, but it does linger in them longer than I would expect. In fact, if you remember back to the beginning of this track, we had gone into something darker and I had said something like, ooh, or I don't know, I got caught off guard. It was a cool harmonic transition. I was expecting to loop back to where we were at the start. And we just kind of lingered around here. And I was like, okay, this is the part when we start the idea over. And then we didn't. We had another 2 bars with an even moodier chord, really lingering in this moment. I honestly thought for a brief moment, we're just going to stay here. There isn't a larger loop. We're not going to start a pattern again or go back to the beginning of this phrase. We're just going to linger here. We didn't. We started it back over again, but we still sat there longer than I would have expected. There's a few ways to read this. It could be a lack of willpower to move on, a momentary lapse in courage, or I don't know. Maybe just taking a moment and thinking, what if we just stayed here? We eventually pull out of that though, and I love the way that the vocals shift too. There are these moments when the vocalist is a bit more full-bodied, giving it this strength, but there's also an equal amount of times when we get these really airy head voice ideas. And the vocals become so paper thin that it almost sounds like they're going to blow away before they even reach my ears. It's heartbreaking because these are usually at some of the darkest harmonic moments. This track doesn't really escape this vibe. It goes through a lot of the nuance of it, but it's sort of this back and forth between this heavy weight and this sorrow, this darkness, trying to find something bright within it, trying to find some way forward. By the end of the track, though, I don't really think we have done that. Contemplated, sure. Mulled over it. But reached a conclusion? I don't think so. And I think that's why this track moves right into the next song. There's not supposed to be an end to track 3. I'd be very surprised if lyrically we found any sort of conclusion, resolution, or finality in the lyrics either. Instrumentally, this track is mostly guitar and vocals. We get some other instruments here and there, and I thought we were going to have a pretty big moment towards the end. We built up a little bit, but we came right back down to the guitar and the vocals in the final moments too. So a lot of this track ends up feeling very folkish to me, Americana folk to be more specific, not necessarily harmonically, but structurally. Americana is a genre of folk that is really based around having your instruments create a vibe, an emotion that fits well with the story being told. The focus is on the story, usually having linear lyrics, not necessarily avoiding choruses, but I do find choruses to be less common. And instrumentally, we're not really looking at anything beyond maybe an A and a B section if there is a chorus, but usually just a lot of A sections. Because musically, it's not about creating pacing or flow. It's about creating an atmosphere that fits the story. If the story is joyous, you want an upbeat, positive atmosphere. And that's it. It could be a simple 4, 8, 16 bar phrase, and then you just loop that over and over and over and over until your vocalist is done telling their story. And I get a lot of that here. If you pay attention to just the acoustic guitar and the vocals, you really get all that you need out of this track. Everything else is really superfluous to that. It's ornamental. It's textural. It embellishes on what the guitar is already saying. We don't really have too much in here that adds brand new ideas to the track. Nothing in here really becomes transformative in any way. It simply reinforces what's already being stated emotionally. We don't have any instrument that contends with or dances with or is playful against the vocal melody. Everything ends up being textured, rhythmic, or harmonic. We don't have any extra melodies in here. It's really more on the minimal side so that the vocalist can get their story out. But I do love the way it's layered, and this is something I haven't really touched on yet, but certainly within the last 11, 12 minutes of music has been quite prevalent within the album, is layering. There's so much of it on this track, whether it is, some arpeggiating lines on some bells or a piano that we saw in The Fox and the Bird, or it's the electric guitars creating a little bit of buzzing sound, or maybe even the wind, I think it was on this track, a sort of field recording layer. There's always something that adds to the feeling of a section without altering the emotional weight of it. And I find it really interesting to hear how they accomplish this. Sometimes it is sonically, like we saw on track 1, where we expanded the types of sounds that we had and the amount of sounds that we had. Sometimes it's organic, like with the wind. And I think we've heard water or rain or something somewhere on this album already. Or it's acoustic, just having some extra drums or a glockenspiel or an extra acoustic guitar added to it. Little ways to add these little ornamental lines, both compositionally, but also sonically too. Always finding ways to embellish the track without changing it. Let's check out some lyrics for the Raccoon and the Myth, and then we'll check out the Journey. This one's called The Raccoon and the Myth. It's about a raccoon and a myth. Oh man. All right, so we have the first verse, which talks about this old weary creature. Doesn't actually ever call it a raccoon. I'm going to assume it is based off the title. But the fox and the bird happen upon him under a willow tree where kindness flows from a golden reverie. It speaks of time long forgotten. It's just setting up a big old quest for them. It says that long ago there was a tale, a legend. There's a way to bring the water back to this world. Spirits that could bring an endless flow of water, like a spring, back to this cursed and deadly wasteland. But it does not come without a price. And so it tells them, you got to go find these things: the skin of a limbless ghoul, the feather of a winged fool, the tooth of a putrid brute, a creature as foul as death, and the claw of a murderous beast, starving for a holy feast. The raccoon says, who would even take up this journey, though? It's impossible. It's at the top of a mountain, and you need all these pieces before the spirits will allow the water to flow. The fox and the bird, they look at each other, and they each said, okay. And so it says that forward they went as faces met with shock, knowing the restless spirits that hunt them among the path that they would walk. Though their lives may be lost along the way, it'd be worth it to save the home they knew deserved to stay. They got a tough task ahead of them, and they're rising to meet the challenge, regardless of the perils. This is the hero's journey to a T. Very cool. A little cliche, but I'm going to roll with it because the setting's pretty neat. Next up, we're going to listen to The Journey and probably also track 5. The Journey is only 2 minutes long, so let's kick it. So we got a cool little 5 here. Dude. Loving the drum work. So the dangers of the journey, but the long road ahead of them. We were in 7, I don't know where. Back to the 5. Yeah, just some cool metric modulation. Oh, it just dawned on me the last track was instrumental too. Back to a 7. Very light cymbal work. So much tension on the guitars. Yeah. And the cool polyrhythmic stuff between the drum and guitar versus the vocals. The shaker, because it's a rattlesnake.
You can take my skin, but I promise you to stay. Your love will never satisfy your
Quite the whirlwinds at the end. Rage, confusion, feeling of being lost in a whirlwind. Voices just kind of swirling around, constantly rising in pitch. It's kind of difficult to even remember what the first tone was. There's so much time of just locking into that next pitch. And it creates this feeling of kind of forgetting where home was, losing our sense of grounding. It fits really well with this tornado sound, this overwhelming component to it. It's just kind of getting lost in here. And the track, I mean, it builds to this honestly through the entirety of it, but we even see a little bit of this animosity, I guess we could call it, towards the end of the towards the beginning of the track. It kicks off heavy. We jump into a Dream Theater-esque progressive metal fairly early in the track, and I thought this was pretty interesting because we've just listened to so many songs that kind of pushed away from that. The Drought gave us something a little heavier, but Fox and the Bird and the Raccoon were rather light. Journey was a little all over the place, but it was a great way to sort of introduce both this sound and these rhythmic devices as we saw at the end of the Journey moving into the Snake. And the rhythmic things I think are interesting because the Journey showed us a 7/4 and a 5/4, maybe some other stuff I didn't pick up on, but the Snake is full of 7. There's a 5, I think, in one place, but most of this track is in 7 pulse. And I wonder why. Is it simply to be off kilter? Because a lot of their rhythms don't neatly fall into the typical 7 idea. Well, there are polyrhythmic devices that you can break up into groups of 3 and 4, which seem to be the general pulse for those. But when you listen to the vocals, you don't really have that. A lot of the vocals are just holding out notes. The vocals in past tracks have been delivered a bit quicker than this one. I wonder if they're trying to embody the Snake a little bit. I also noticed that this is the 4th different vocal inflection we've heard this entire album. We've had light and ephemeral. We've had sort of weary and tired. We've had powerful. And now we have sort of angry. It's projected and full, but it also feels at times that it's being sung through bared teeth. Which is interesting because snakes don't have teeth, but whatever. You can feel something seething there. At the times when the vocalist obviously isn't just, very wide mouth, full delivery, really pushing that sound out as loud and large as possible. But there's other lines, particularly I think in the opening verse before the song really got to a point of escalation, that it sounded like they were just kind of singing through like a closed mouth. And I find that to be really interesting because you don't hear that too often. It's something you will see in actors when they're visually delivering lines, but not something you hear too often from vocalists. And honestly, I don't know if that's what she was doing, but there's certainly some sort of implied force in the vocal work in that opening verse, which is, again, not something I hear too often in music. It's either projected or it's withheld. You don't really have an element of like blocking the voice so that you get this extra width to it as the air has to kind of go around a barrier. So right from the start, I mean, we got some crazy guitar work, we got some crazy drum work, but even the vocals kind of lean into this feeling of danger, being in a place you're not supposed to be, you're not wanted. It all comes together really well there. I love the slinking feeling throughout this too. I think a lot of it comes through the vocal delivery, particularly the phrasing. As I had mentioned, the vocals don't really go through syllables very quickly. In this track, a lot of syllables are held onto longer than in other ones. I feel like there were just less words said overall in this track, but it kind of gives that kind of, whenever you have like a snake in Disney cartoons again, or someone personifying a snake. It was that heavy lingering on S sounds. So it'll be like, don't slink away. And it creates this pause, this slowness to get through a sentence, which normally you would say quicker. It's this lingering on syllables that I think even, avoiding S's in general, but just hanging on to syllables is something we see so often, which has this feeling of, I don't know, it's a slow drip, maybe. It's interesting because the rest of the music is intense. The guitars are riffing away. The drummer in this track is absolutely bonkers. So many polyrhythmic and I think even polymetric ideas within here, and using the entire kit. There's just so many really cool drum patterns. And then the vocalist is just holding out these notes and kind of stilted against the rest of the momentum. But there's also like a very there's a perfection to the vocal delivery too. So like a snake, right? When a snake goes to attack, it coils and then snaps. It bites and reels back in real quick. That's almost what some of this feels like in just its sheer precision and immediacy. While the rest of the band is doing all of this dexterous stuff, the guitarists are just all over the neck, the drummer is all over the kit, the keyboardist is probably all over the keys, the vocalist is da 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 da. Very specific attacks at specific points within this odd time signature, and also such large accent at the beginning of each syllable that's kind of backed away a little bit as soon as it hits, almost like a sforzando. Well, the opposite of a sforzando. No, not like a sforzando at all. My brain said quick dynamic changes. That's a sforzando, but it's not. Sforzando is when you hit the note loud, immediately drop it to nothing, and then bring it back up. This is just strike it and back off a little bit. But it's still that really quick. Even the word I use is strike, striking the notes. But even when I thought about the note choices, I found this to be a bit obtuse at times. While the rest of the music is sort of leaning into a chaotic danger, the vocal melody is awkward. Even those notes I just sung didn't really seem like they made much sense, but I was trying my best. I'm not a vocalist. I can't sing specific pitches back after hearing them. Maybe even like that would be perfect pitch too. I don't know. Anyways, I can't do that. But I was trying to mimic the feeling I had while listening to this because I really couldn't anticipate what the next note was going to be. It's not like we have cascading thirds. It's not like we're jumping around fifths, things that are more stable. There's jumps down that are like maybe a down to, I don't know, down 3, up 2, down 5, up 1. It all seems kind of random to me. Sometimes we come down a little bit and then we rise up over our first initial pitch. I can't really anticipate what's going on with the vocalist. But when it happens, you just got to accept it. It happens so quickly. I really hope this is something that's going to continue to go on through here. I know we only have a few more animals, the falcon, the bear, and the crocodile. But I think right here, this track immediately puts me in the mind of a snake. Maybe biased by the title. I don't know if I would have come to the same conclusion without it. But with all the information present, yeah, dude, I can absolutely hear that. Is there anything else I want to bring up? We've already talked about the whirlwind of it, off-kilter, vocal, acting, phenomenal stuff there. Drum work's crazy, polyrhythmic, polymeter. Guitar is wild on this. It was just a bonkers track, dude. This is one of those, like, the Raccoon and the Myth. You listen to that one time, there's emotional depth, but you kind of get the gist of it. This is layered in a way we haven't really seen yet. So it's really going to be something that takes multiple listens to get all of the details on. But I think as far as a surface level read, I'm happy with what I've landed on here. Let's hit some lyrics. I'll take some help on this. If anyone wants to put into the comments their interpretation of this track, the lyrics can be found at genius.com. The snake isn't angry. It's not even antagonistic. In fact, as the raccoon mentioned, we need the skin of a limbless being. That would be the snake, and snakes do shed their skin. The snake hands it over willingly. There really isn't any conflict in this track. The first step is incredibly easy, but the snake has words to say. It has thoughts to share. The first verse says, "See me shriveling in pieces. Hear this cacophony of quiet screams, and when the night is over, they don't go away. Death becomes me. He's inviting, no escaping. Your love will never quench the endless thirst of your rage." The only thing I can figure is that we kind of have the opposite of situational irony here, where the snake is aware of something with the bird or the fox that we're not aware of yet. Because 5 tracks in, I don't see how the fox or the bird are filled with rage at all, or have an endless thirst of rage. Your love will never quench the thirst of your rage. We then have the line, "Few can save the soulless," which is really interesting. It could mean that only a special chosen few could save them, or that the sacrifices of a few could save everyone else. But it also mentions them as soulless, not as the beings of the forest. Snake doesn't seem to have a fond view of the people he shares this area with. He then, though, does confess that he doesn't believe their journey will be one that ends well for them. Says, "Useless fools, your fate is simple, black, infested, sickening, dry bones." Then he hands the scales over. "You can take my skin, but I promise you this day, your love will never satisfy your rage." And then we focus on decomposition and death once again, saying, let the earth consume me, sink into it, sink into the suffering, carcasses infected with ripened dunes of emptiness and endless soulless nothingness. Sink down, you'll never escape from your rage. Yeah, I'm very lost on this. Everything else seemed to make a lot of sense to me. I thought this was going to be a very straightforward, surface level tale of the fox and the bird collecting these 5 or 6 things and taking them up to the top of a mountain and making the wish or calling upon the spirits or whatever it is, and having water rush back into the land. Track 5 is throwing me for a loop. Again, I'll take some other people's perspective on this one. Let me know what you think's going on with that one. Although it's possible it'll clear itself up as we get through the album and I learn some more stuff. I don't see any track where maybe we would get some backstory. We do have a track called The Bird. Maybe that one isn't chronologically about the bird, but it's a flashback and we find out the bird is the one full of rage. I don't know. This next track is called The Nightmare. classic danger chord progressions. The gnashing of teeth is interesting. Okay. Alright, I thought I timed that better. I was bouncing my head to the salsa music playing across the street. I don't know if y'all can hear that. I think I have a pretty good job of canceling out background noises in the mic, but this dude loves to play his music super loud. I hear it all day long. Alright, I didn't want to stop there, but I figure it's a good one because the Falcon is the 6-minute track, and I don't want to have to kind of worry about the nightmare and trying to remember stuff about that through that one for the analysis segment. I don't have a lot to add on to here, though. This is, well, I mean, it's what they've been doing really well, which is, once again, sort of this romantic era classical approach to writing, which is emotion first. Not strictly through atmosphere, but everything is designed to support a specific feeling, a specific flavor at this moment. And this track absolutely feels like a nightmare from start to finish. It starts off eerie and unsettling. The drum part is funky. The bass is enormous. The guitar is completely haunting and antagonistic. It doesn't just say there's danger lurking. It says the danger is here, right next to you. You got that doo, 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 like just big, powerful, dangerous sounds all over. And eventually, we even bring in this or orchestral element. It sounds like strings, definitely, but maybe even some lower end brass in there, like baritones and tubas. And it's just this really big theatric display of tension and terror simultaneously, all wrapped up in this drum part that is driving. Everyone else is kind of just holding out these big chunky chords. The guitar is playing a bit of a faster lick, I suppose, but the drummer is like kind of creating all this anxiety here. It's just so driven. You don't have a time to stop and catch your breath, but you are surrounded by all of this, and it is just this tension that the drums are bringing to the table. You don't really get a chance to sit back in this. You're on the edge of your seat the entire time. And it's just incredibly effective at creating something dangerous and scary and terrifying and right on your heels at every moment. There is escalation from start to finish, but there is no moment when things let up. I don't think there's anything in here that specifically screams dreamlike to me. This could also just be, real physical being chased through this forest as you're trying to complete your journey here. But it is called the Nightmare, so I'm going to assume it is a dream-based nightmare. But it does a phenomenal job at crafting this sound overall, leaning into it, exploring it, and expanding it. At no point did I feel like it was retreading similar ground or being too long-winded in any way. Just expertly paced with continual growth and expansion. It's just incredibly well done. All right, the big epic track in the middle of the album. Let's dive in. Very fun finger picking on the guitar to start. Love the vibrato on that.
Hidden wings, grace with these will follow. Master of the wind. Will they be as unkind as he?
An interesting shift to a type of progressive pop rock. A little bit of harmonic simplicity there. But also switching to 4/4 was that?
Ask politely, you may receive, but my heart lives for play. Catch the feather in flight if you dare, the take of it you may.
Like a breeze. I like this pre-chorus. I mean, this one's certainly lasting longer than the last one did. That's just a really fun line. Very Haken right there. Actually, coming back to Dream Theater on that. fun drum part. I just praised the Nightmare in particular, but kind of OK Goodnight in general, of just having really strong pacing on this album. Every track, even for ones as singular minded like Raccoon and the Myth or the Nightmare, still don't ever feel like they outlast or overstay their welcome. They're always doing some cool stuff that is expanding on the emotional and atmospheric resonance of whatever they're looking to do. As soon as I make this observation, they throw in this Dream Theater wankery in here. I don't think this will ever be my cup of tea. I do not understand how playing the same thing over and over, but you took one note off and then you added two notes, and now you got three different riffs and you're just going to play them back to back. You're going to do this 10 times over because this time you're going to do it on keyboard and the next time you're going to do it on a slightly different sounding guitar. And it's not interesting to me. From like a compositional standpoint, sure, the entire idea of adding and subtracting beats in order to create varying iterations on an idea and then creating larger patterns out of your various iterations on paper sounds cool. I'm not going to deny that. And I think it's a cool exercise to explore. I have certainly done it myself. I don't enjoy listening to that, though. There needs to be something else there. I would have loved a melody here. I would have loved the textured layering that we had seen in other tracks. I would have loved something more than just that. What if the drums started throwing in some polyrhythms, polymeters? The drummer did start to get a little more interesting towards the end, but a lot of that was the drummer kind of getting out of the way for the guitars to do what they're doing. And the synth solo was neat, though very Dream Theater inspired. Lots of the pitch wheel usage there. And you know, that's absolutely cool too. I think you got your inspirations, wear them on your sleeve, and I'll pay an homage to the people who got you interested in music or who have helped define your taste or whatever like that. 100%. Very cool moment here from that regard. But I thought we had a pretty decent track. I was kind of lost on all of the variety. We'll touch on that in a second. This song was not as cohesive as some of the other songs have been. But generally speaking, very cool moments within the opening 3 minutes of this track. And then from 3 to 5.5, it totally lost me. The pacing was gone. The interesting moments and layering was gone. All we had left was this sort of hyper focused on how much room can we take up with one core riff and making slight variations on it. And it's the same thing that puts me to sleep when I listen to Dream Theater. And even to an extent, sometimes Haken. I think Haken they're less of an offender in this regard, but they've certainly done this a number of times that I can say that they're kind of wrapped up in this too. But it's one of the things that just really puts me off of Dream Theater more often than not. They have really cool ideas, and some of their more focused tracks are excellent, but the minute that they kind of just devolve into let's just play some guitar stuff, it loses me. But I think a lot of it too is rooted in metal, which I've mentioned this many times. I'm not a real big metal head. A lot of the guitar focused stuff like this, though this is a more palatable side, but you can find similar ideas within death metal, within black metal. Maybe a little less so in black metal. Thrash, though, absolutely. All these guitar focused genres just kind of taking time away from the song to explore like pure instrument ideas rather than something that supports the song. It's always going to take me out of it. And to me, that's the difference in what I would subjectively call a tasteful solo versus a showmanship solo. And while this wasn't technically a solo, it definitely feels like it veers into the side of showmanship where it's done for the members of the band rather than the narrative focus of the song. The song didn't need this, and yet we have it anyways. So that's my piece on that. Highly subjective, but it is my reaction to hearing this extended section in the middle of this track. And it's weird too, because, you know, we've had a 5-minute song. It was 4:58, close enough. And we have a couple more ahead of us, a 5:05, a 5:12, a 5:30. I really hope that those tracks aren't drawn out and bloated like this one was. This could easily have been another 4.5-minute track, just like any of the others. It just wasn't. And I would hate to see this become a trend on the back half of this album, because it would turn an album that so far I am absolutely head over heels in love with, and turn it into something that I would probably only listen to the first half of, which is a bit of a shame, because it is so right up my alley up to this point. It is highly theatrical. It's incredibly dynamic. It is well paced. The melodic lines are excellent. The layers are phenomenal. The technical components are interesting and digestible simultaneously. It isn't too far out there, but it isn't incredibly safe either. It's just an exciting album. This part just didn't excite me, and I hope it doesn't become a trend and the rest of the album doesn't excite me. With that said, looking at the rest of this track, I did mention that it's kind of all over the place. The pre-chorus is gorgeous. I love the incredible time control here as we kind of take all the energy down. We kind of lay down a few notes, and then we just kind of hold out these notes for a while. And it's just light, and it's like we're forgetting everything, just entering this meditative state. And it's gone in a flash the first time, but the pre-chorus into the second chorus stuck around for a while. I'm not even sure if I can call it a pre-chorus, because it's kind of an idea all on its own, not something based around another section of the track. And it's just an incredibly serene moment. And for a track called The Falcon, I really expected, especially as I think this album has been, in a sense, sort of elementally coded so far. The Snake was earthier, 100%. Very much had a volcanic element to it. A lot of that song felt red and brown to me, which are also colors for, I mean, I guess snakes can be a lot of colors, but reds and browns, I guess, for more dangerous snakes. We did have a rattle, like a shaker sound in there too, so maybe we're looking at a rattlesnake. I don't know. It's just, that's kind of the color I got from it. Fox and the Bird is very flora. It's very green, bushes and trees, and just open air blues I kind of get in there as well. The Falcon is, well, I was expecting something very airy and open. It's incredibly more driven than I expected, but also the Snake caught me off guard too, so maybe I have the wrong headspace expectations for some of these songs. some of them do exactly what I expect and others don't. So they're keeping me on my toes at at the least amount. But pre-chorus is what I would expect from this. I found it really interesting then when the pre-chorus kicked into the chorus and we kind of had a slightly progressive pop rock section. We ditched the 5 that we had on the intro of the track, went to a 4/4, kind of reduced the harmonic complexity a little bit, and it was just kind of driven and bouncy. The vocal melody felt very familiar, which, as I've mentioned, the snake, the vocal melody was completely obtuse. No, it never went in a direction I thought it was going to, interval wise, or even rising versus falling ideas. So the Falcon's melody being more familiar makes sense to me, but it's also not the sound I would expect. I was kind of expecting more freedom in here, something with untapped potential, an expansive sound. And we didn't really get much of that. I think the chorus kind of came the closest with an energy. I mean, pop punk is very carefree, generally speaking. And I think that some of that injected its way into here, but the harmonic structure wasn't perfectly pop punk. And it brought a little bit of uncertainty to the mix that you typically just don't hear in that genre. It's supposed to be lighthearted, and I mean, it's selfish, centered around one's community, one's ideas, one's world. Selfish isn't the right word, but it's definitely a bit smaller in scope, I think is the word I want for that. But fun and bouncy. And the Falcon is kind of a weird, that's not necessarily a very flying kind of vibe there. The 5/4 was interesting too because it wasn't quite as off-putting as the Snakes or the Journey's exploration into 7, but it wasn't particularly easy to follow either, especially with the polyrhythmic ideas coming off of the drums and bass. So it sets it up for a track that once again kind of creates friction with the listener. It sets up antagonism. Maybe I should expect this now. The snake was antagonistic, though they gave over their skin pretty quickly. Maybe I should expect the bear and the crocodile to also be antagonistic, in which case the bird will be as well, and maybe that leans into the whole rage thing that the snake was warning about. I kind of assumed, though, that if you go up to someone and say, hey, I need a small resource of yours and it'll fix your environment, they'd kindly give it over to you. But I suppose it might also be crazy if I told them a raccoon told me to take your claw or your skin or your feather up to a mountain and commune with the spirit. So maybe they won't believe me. Now I'm some sort of door-to-door salesman talking about some crazy prophecy. Maybe there is going to be some antagonism, some friction to that. But the verse is so different too. The pre-chorus is calm, it's serenity, it's almost emptiness. The chorus is upbeat and driven with a little bit of groundedness to it. And the verse is really driven. It's powerful, it's projected. There is a sense of, it felt like it wanted to lean towards freedom, but because of the complexities of everything, it got dragged down by that. The weight of all of the ideas working together, the cumulative power of that, pulling it down. I find this to be really interesting because, I don't know, this album has continued to confound me. I thought I had a really strong grasp at the beginning, but now both the snake and the falcon, well, even the fox and the bird, I felt that the lyrical elements and the musical elements weren't quite as aligned as I thought they were going to be. Let's check out some lyrics for this. Maybe we're not actually looking at a falcon in flight. Maybe they're chained or something. I don't know. Maybe they don't have the energy to fly. The playfulness of the chorus makes a lot of sense. It says, savor this moment, because there's more to follow. Known for sure. Actually, dang, I messed that up. The second verse is where I find the playfulness. It says, ask politely. You may receive, but my heart lives for play. Catch the feather in flight if you dare, then take of it you may. So he says, I'll give you my feather, but we're going to play catch. I'm going to pluck it from myself in mid-flight, and you've got to catch it. Wherever it lands, wherever the wind takes it. So we do have a playfulness to this character. The chorus says, savor this moment, because there's more to follow. Known for sure this time is delicate. Braver, you'll never know what's waiting. Don't fear no more. Today we own the sky. This chorus is interesting to me because it seems backwards. Savor this moment because there's more to follow. Usually savor things that you don't have as much of. Unless the more to follow is the journey. There's still more tasks ahead of you, so favor this game because things are going to get worse. That might be the way to read that. It says, known for sure that time is delicate. Yes, but braver, you'll never know what's waiting. I don't understand that line. You don't know what's on the other side and you're braver for that? You don't know what's ahead of you and you're braver for that? I don't know. Don't fear today, though, because we own the sky. That makes sense. Granted, the fox can't fly, but the bird certainly knows of this, as does the falcon. It's just a very, I live in this moment, bruh. Just enjoy it. Let's go out. I'm going to throw my feather down. You got to catch it. He's just very, he's that stereotype of the dude who's always in the moment, living for the now. But what I find interesting is that we do have contrast, and this actually puts the pre-chorus in a lot of perspective. The second pre-chorus says, careful now, into caves unsound. Stay with me. So we're going in places that are unexplored. Stay nearby. This could tie into the ideas of not knowing what's waiting around the corner, but not to worry about it. Today we own the sky. So he's saying, stick with me. We're going to figure this out. We're going to weather it together. It may be a metaphorical cave, but there is the pre-chorus the first time around. Will they be as unkind as he? Just keep moving. I'm curious. This is the second time that a line has been stated that I don't know who it's directed to or who it's about. The rage that the snake speaks about, and now a he that possibly also asked for a feather. Maybe the first person who came by decided to steal the feather rather than to play the game. Guess we'll just have to keep going. Next up, we have The Dream. This one is less than 2 minutes. It's the shortest one. We're going to run it straight into the bear. See what's going on with these two. I like the use of woodwinds. It's interesting. It's called The Dream, but I'm kind of getting the visuals of a glade. Maybe a fog as well, although the haziness kind of also is very dreamlike. Generally pleasant sounds, though. The woodwinds are definitely giving it an earthy, grounded feeling while also having a lot of airiness to it. a combined mix of ethereal or airy with that wooden grounded physicality. Oh. Yeah, cool 7. Dude, the drum work on this is just phenomenal. Love that. Yeah, so very djenty in this rhythm, but we wrap it up with a move to the Phrygian mode. Cool little violin stuff over here.
Stumble through the dark, pray falsify. Together we survive. Overwhelm my senses. Hunger roars in my stead. Dress my palms black with filth. Still my claws are stained red. They save you. Starving the throat and out just as I suffer. As heroes must on won't lie. Your kind could never understand. Salvation need. The world has written rules for us that cannot be broken. Rivals bleed together in the fight, but I alone survive.
I forgot about that smooth harmonic transition.
Across the wrist, spirits, please. The rain, will you return to us from the holy mountains? Rivals bleed
Yeah, that song's just as good as the first time I heard it. But I will say it feels simpler than the rest of the tracks. The solo, the bridge section has a lot of complexities to it, but for the most part, it seems like a bit of room has been carved out to have both of the vocalists in the second verse, in the final chorus, in the pre-choruses. And that makes sense because they want to have all those cool harmonies and counterpoint in there. And, you got to make room for that. So most of this track is very very genty. Just pick 2 or 3 notes and play some jagged rhythms with those. Boom, bom, bom, ba-dum, bom, bom, ba-do, ba, bom, bom, bom. So it's less melodically exploratory from the instrumental perspective and primarily focusing on rhythm and texture, which is absolutely Gent's MO right there. But we'll talk about the bear in a second. I want to start on the dream first. This was very cool. What I find interesting about it is that the nightmare was intense. 100%. The dream doesn't necessarily go for the opposite of that. We don't have serenity or pure calm here. That would be like revisiting track 2, The Fox and the Bird. Instead, we just have something that is, I don't know, chill, I guess. I mentioned that through a lot of this, it sort of reminded me of a glade with a light fog on top of the water. And whatever those, what is that cliche? It's like a stem of like a leaf and then like a brown cylinder that's at the top of them that you can see in like swamps. Maybe it's just because I live around swamps. I see a lot of those. But it's something reed. I don't remember the name of that specific plant. But like I can see this whole area of like these trees growing out of the water and this light fog and all these little reed things sitting in there. It's kind of like drifting, not from a specific physical place, not like on a boat or anything, but sort of this disembodied eye, maybe, just kind of like drifting through this place. And it's just the sun is starting to come up and the light's coming through the fog. And that's what the dream feels like to me. And I think it really is this mix of sounds that we're getting from the woodwinds that embody a lot of this because it's a very airy sound. There's something ethereal or ephemeral. Ethereal is the wrong one, but ephemeral, something that can't be touched here, but there's also the woodenness of these instruments that gives it a grounded feeling, a physicality. And I just think it's interesting to have both of these sounds coming from the same instrument throughout most of this. There's clarinets. I believe there's an oboe in here as well. And it feels like a place that doesn't exist, but that you can visit. And if that doesn't encapsulate what a dream is, I think I don't know what else to say about it. But what I find really interesting is that it doesn't go for serenity. It is simply a calm area. Dreams are usually the opposites of nightmares, but we don't have opposing emotions here, at least not in the same extremity. We haven't swung to the complete opposite side of this spectrum of tension and anxiety. I really appreciate that. Anyways, I enjoyed that as a nice little interlude, and it's a great way to set up the bear as one of the heavier tracks on the album, complete with harsh vocals, even from the featured vocalist Elizabeth Hull. And I've listened to this track. I'm pretty sure I linked it earlier, but I'll link it again. You can listen to my original reaction from a couple of years back. This is a solid song that really highlights the vocalist, as I already mentioned. A lot of the instrumental work kind of gets out of the way for it, but we do have some really great drum work. We have some cool guitar work and keyboard work. Most of this is relegated to the vocalist bridge, but you can still hear some cool ideas, particularly from the drums in the verse and the chorus. And I do think that this is probably their strongest track so far for a single, which is probably why it was their debut track from this album, why they even had a music video for it. It is incredibly catchy, but it also showcases so much of the vocal work. Even those first two syllables in the chorus, maybe it's the first three because you have two lower notes and then just this massive jump up to the third syllable there. And it just feels right. It's a powerful movement. And then we get the harmonies on that, on at least the third verse. Maybe the second one also had it too. Um, and it's just like the chorus is catchy, it's powerful, it is an earworm all within itself. The instruments aren't really adding much to it. The guitar plays around with a similar melody, the keyboard is laying down some chordal work. The bass and drums, they're just kind of sitting back a little bit. They're more active and engaged in the verse. The chorus is just a great single chorus. But I can also see where if maybe you're more of a prog head, that this might be one of the less interesting tracks for you. And I think the fact that I have talked about it mostly in terms of djent, being textured and rhythmic rather than melodically or harmonically exploratory, like I have talked about this entire album, is probably the reason why, if that's the case for you. But I do think that that makes it more palatable. In a lot of ways, this feels like a lot of alternative metal that you can find uh, topping the charts, especially if you're listening to like Octane from Sirius XM. Very atmospherically and textured focused. There's the metal sound. There's a lot of rhythmic ideas in here that are infectious, but the vocals are poppy and memorable. It's a really strong introduction to this band if you have never heard them before. But on the other side of that too are the verses, which still feature a lot of really dynamic vocal melodies, but gives us more in the way of the texture layering of the clean and the harsh vocals. And we hear a lot of this in the second verse, but a little bit in the first, and especially more as we head into the final chorus as well, with Elizabeth contributing her harsh vocals, her screams underneath a lot of the vocal lines. There's also that one section I really love at the end of each of the verses where each of the vocalists has a line and one kind of just holds out these syllables slowly. They probably have a shorter sentence and the other one has a faster melody, but like the first word and the last word are very similar and they land on them. They start on it and land on it at the same exact time. It's just the journey between them is different. And I've always just absolutely loved that whole concept right there. It's just a cool little bit of counterpoint with a little bit of linguistic parallel in it too. Um, there is, of course, the bridge here. I'll be honest, hearing it a second time, I think I enjoyed it more the first time around. Maybe it's also a little bit of the fatigue of just coming off of the Falcon too, because this one also starts to deviate into just sort of playing the same riff over and over and over, where the drums change a little bit and the riff sometimes changes a little bit. And then when I think it's finally over and we've started to move into a brand new idea, we snap back to it as if the rubber band had been stretched too far and now we've just gone back to where we started. But I'll say this. I've started to think about this in terms of narration. Why would we be doing this? Sonically, not necessarily my favorite thing in either of these tracks. But the thing is, OK Goodnight, they know how to craft a story, not just vocally, not just lyrically, but they know how to tell a story through music. This is something I've been praising this whole time. So what are they trying to tell me here? What are they trying to explain through this? I wonder then if the Falcon wasn't about the game. That whole section was about trying to catch a falling feather and the amount of time it took to do so. Maybe. The bear, I'm not so sure. Maybe we'll find something in the lyrics. As of right now, though, it seemed to take one of the guitar riffs from earlier in the track, I believe it was the second verse, and start to explore it in a wider guitar tone with the synth over here lining up with it, and the drummer just the drummer's just sick across this whole album. Dude, I have nothing but praise for the drummer. Every single time that I turn my ear to them, they are doing something bonkers, dude. I'm loving it. But it is a bit of an extended section once again. Maybe the lyrics will point towards why we need that, or what kind of story it might be telling, how it's bouncing off of what lyrics came before it, or where we're going with them. And on that note, let's dive into some lyrics, see what's going on there. Something that I hadn't considered up till this point was that maybe the lyrics are allegorical. We have the idea of two people from different walks of life, a bird and a fox, teaming up to go on this hero's journey and get help from people who kind of go through all walks of life. The snake, while giving up their skin, wasn't too interested in really helping them and felt that their journey was going to fail. The Falcon just wanted to play around, very chill, laid back guy. The bear here is antagonistic and seems to attack the fox and the bird. I have to assume that they end up getting his nail, claw, whatever the prophecy said, but it doesn't outright state that in the same way that the Falcon and the snake tracks did. But why I think this might be allegorical is that here we have a contrast of lived experience, a contrast of beliefs and understandings of how the world works. In fact, this entire element, or this entire track here, is a contrast of singularity or isolationism versus coming together to help each other. The bear survives by himself. And this is a statement he even says in the chorus. The second chorus says, "Together, you, my rivals, you bleed together in the fight, but I alone survive." This is a big contrast from the first and third chorus, which I believe is to be said from the perspective of the fox and the bird, that says, "Together in the fight, together we survive." The bear is overconfident in his own abilities since he has always had to rely on himself. And we'll see in other places of this, of the lyrics here, that he doesn't believe that their working together is going to work too well, as they have consistently been prey for him. He's a big bear. These are the kinds of things he eats. So he doesn't see them as a foe at all, really, and he doesn't see them as anyone who is capable of playing the hero because they're too small. And it was here, I think, the first time I really start to see this this clashing of ideology that has kind of had me tilting my head and wondering if there's more to this. I probably should have connected the dots earlier, though. I'd be surprised if we don't wrap this up without some sort of conclusion that could be drawn to our society, simply because I've already made the allusions to Disney, and Disney's done a pretty good job over the decades of using talking animals to tell stories that we can take into our own lives. Now, granted, the stories are usually on the simpler side, aimed at children, but still, selfishness, the cornerstone of a Disney story. Selflessness and rising up to the occasion, being kind to others, even if they aren't necessarily the people that society tends to be kind to, and seeing what's within someone rather than what they show on their exterior. And that goes both ways too, finding heroes in the mundane, but also finding villainy in the pretty or the gorgeous. that someone's insides are not always reflective of how they portray themselves outwardly. So these kind of ideas are prevalent within these types of stories. And it's not just Disney either. I mean, this is all throughout history. We have stories of talking animals that have morals to them. It has me wondering what I might take away from this on a second time through it, as I'd be familiar with where the story's going, and maybe there's some lines spoken previously that would make more sense to me now that I know the story, especially still the line about the rage in the snake and the he who was not kind or gentle in the falcon. Now, we kick this off, says, breath escape me, feel my heart beat. Surrender is the temptress that we must meet, waiting in the mire for a swift retreat. Brace my wings before the rift, don't fail me now before I give into the rift. So we have this idea of kind of being on the back pedal, being exhausted, breath is escaping me, I can feel my heart beat, tensions are high, surrender is taunting me. I will choose not to go that direction, though. The chorus says, spirits please, the rain will you return to us from the holy mountain. Stay with me, together through the light, together we survive. This almost sounds like a pleading one to the spirits. Here, we don't have everything you need, but hopefully you can see we're trying. But I think it's also a pleading to the bear. Dude, there's these spirits, they're going to bring the rain back. I just need your claw. I need one of your claws, and then we can be out of your hair. And then a turning to the other person here and says, stay with me, together we'll survive. When we shift over to Elizabeth, this is the perspective of the bear. And this is interesting because as far as I can tell in the snake and the falcon and the raccoon, we don't get the fox's or the bird's perspective in those. It's shifted entirely to the animal that carries the namesake of the track. I find this to be really interesting that we are bouncing back and forth here, and I wonder then if track 12 will be similar, since that's another track that features Elizabeth on vocals, and I wonder if OK Goodnight's regular vocalist is going to be the bird and the fox, and then the mountain will be voiced by Elizabeth, or maybe the spirits. That makes more sense, right? I don't know where I was going with a talking mountain. Anyways, the bear says, by light you run, yet you stumble through the dark, pray, falsify, overwhelming my senses, but my hunger roars in my stead. Dress my palms black with filth, still my claws are stained red. Says you ran in here, you're stumbling through the dark, you're hoping that you can survive this by kind of keeping out of the light, but my senses are on overdrive. I can still smell you. I can still hear you. Though my paws are filthy, you can still see the red on them. So he's aggressive. And it looks like the fox and the bird aren't going to make it out of this alive. Now, here's the part I was talking about where we have the ideological clash. It says, play savior, like you're starving this brute, treating him like an outcast, as I suffer. This hero's facade of yours won't last. Your kind could never understand your selfish needs. The world has written rules for us that can't be broken. Rivals bleed together in the fight, but I alone survive. So taking the chorus that was originally brought up and twisting it to new lyrics that fit this new perspective. He basically says, this is the way of the world. You can't fight that. No one can fight that. We're not destined to work together. And if the world's ready to decay, the world's going to decay. You can't fight back against that either. The drought, that's just the way things are going to be. It says you can play a survivor, but your facade won't last long. Eventually it's going to drop. You're no hero. Neither of you are. I will survive this fight as I have always survived against your kind. But then, of course, we get the final chorus after the tussle of music, the bridge there that probably could be read as the fight. And we have the bird, the bird and the fox singing again, spirits, please return to us the rain. If you stay with me together, we will survive the fight. And underneath this, Elizabeth is doing the growls, saying rivals bleed, but I alone survive. So we're getting both the fox and the bird and the bear's perspective in this final chorus. But again, nothing in here signifies we got what we needed from the bear. So I'm kind of curious. I'm going to suppose we did. When we hit the mountain, I'm sure they'll drop all the items they needed. But unlike the other tracks that explicitly stated that we got those, this one didn't. All right, this next track is called Crocodile. We may run this into track 11, being 11 is so short, but we'll see where this one takes us. Another situation of
faces around here. I'm not the most graceful of hosts, but please make yourselves at home.
Another situation of the vocalist putting a performance on to match a new character. Oh, very Alice in Chains. Maybe not anymore. We have that stereo staging on the vocals.
Wait, come back. I cherish every little angelic creature in the weight of slack. My mouth is dripping from a voracious appetite.
This is all over the place. Less reminiscent of the bear, but very similar to the falcon.
We've come so far, we cannot give in.
All right. This was an interesting track because it kind of combines a lot of what we have been exploring recently, while it is very much the Crocodile. Once again, heavy focus on style, really getting a specific emotion and vibe out of this sound. Each of these tracks has had a unique soundscape paired with them, whether that's instrumentally, harmonically, compositionally, the way things are just built up, whether they are more layered or more singular in focus. But we also have the vocal performances on all of these that just help differentiate them. But we are starting to see some repeated ideas. This one was very genty, much like the Bear. We had a lot of rhythmic passages on the bass and electric guitars, focusing more on the texture and rhythm of them than memorable riffage or melody writing. The drums on here were bonkers, as they always have been, but we also saw a lot of the sort of scattered approach to style that we saw on the Falcon, which was quickly snapping between like 3 different ideas. And we saw that here as well. I don't know what to take away from this. We have the wild drive of the verses. We have, I don't know if they're the chorus. We pull the energy way back. We reduce most of the layers. It becomes kind of quiet and introspective. I'm not sure what these sections are supposed to be implying, but given the rest of this album, I'm going to assume that they make sense with the lyrical story in a way that's fairly close to how I understand some of Genesis' earlier work. In that, when I come at it purely from a musical mindset, I'm a little disappointed, but if I actually listen to the words that are being said, the lyrics themselves, the music is the backdrop to that. Much like, set dressing and lighting on a play or a film. And it's there to support the story. And I think that's what's happening in these tracks, where some of the earlier ones were very focused on creating a general vibe. For tracks like the Falcon and the Crocodile, we're creating emotions for specific segments, as if maybe we are being able to hyperfixate on specific moments of this interaction between our heroes and the Crocodile and see and feel these specific emotions in these microcosms. But we do generally whip back and forth pretty quickly between high intensity drive, groovy rhythms, and very introspective moments. I'm not sure what to read into that though. Now, I love the vocals on this one. We get a lot of spoken word stuff on this track, which I thought was pretty interesting. We have pretty much a full-on acted outro on this. There's a little bit of rhythm in where lines start so that they can line up well with the general vibes, but it doesn't seem like they're specifically trying to time it to the music in a way that makes it feel sing-songy. It feels like it's natural speech, the cadence is at least, and it's just delivered as if it's voice acting rather than singing. Very interesting to hear that, and we get a little bit of that at the beginning too, but even inside of the song itself, once the vocalist begins to sing, we still see a very different side of the vocals than we have in other tracks, and I think this is something that's just been consistently great on this album, alongside the atmospheric writing that is consistently really great, is just the vocal energy and delivery that helps differentiate all these characters, alongside the musical energy that differentiates all these different vibes and atmospheres. And that's, to me, is the highlight of this. It is something that I've always asked for when it comes to concept albums with many characters, is, hire more vocalists or do some voices if you're a solo vocalist. Let me know who's singing what. And here's something interesting, is when we get to those introspective moments, the vocals change. They become that airy, light sound again. And I wonder if, because they're not that sneering, snarling, like gravelly sound, a lot of fry crackle being worked into that. Ooh, I'll come back to that in a second. But I wonder if we have changed perspective to the bird and the fox at that point. Speaking about the crackle, though, isn't that like a general vocal characteristic of crocodiles? Like, I don't think she's emulating a crocodile, not perfectly, but it is evoking the sound that a crocodile makes. That low popcorn popping, crackling, growling stuff. I wonder if that's why they decided to go in that direction and make him, or make it, I suppose, I don't know, have this kind of voice, while also focusing on lower tones in general. The vocalist really drops her voice down in order to get into this crocodile character, but also injecting that fry into it as well. Yeah, excellent stuff. There is a really cool rhythmic thing going on in here too. You may have watched me, moving my head along to this track and like, dude, he's not anywhere near it. But then I line back up and you're like, oh, that was kind of weird. There is a polymetric idea where we shift from one rhythmic pulse to another and then back to the first. But if you stick with the first, it doesn't line up with anything in the second passage, but it is still that tempo, and you can still feel it in that meter if you want. It's like a polymetric device where you're only playing the new meter instead of the old one, so you don't get that clash necessarily, but it's still present. And there's some cool places where that happens. And then there's the bridge, which, I mean, once again, we have another Dream Theater exploration thing. It's quite cacophonous. It reminds me a lot of the bridge from The Bear. I'm just going to assume, I remember the crocodile saying he was going to eat them or something, and maybe this is another battle. I don't know. Sonically, it still didn't really grab me, but that's just me. I don't know if I'll ever come around to this type of composition. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. We'll see what's going on with the crocodile. Well, in much the same way, we have an altercation between our protagonists and this animal that is a predator, but they need to get his tooth this time. We don't necessarily have a clashing of ideology, though. This is baser. The crocodile is hungry, and these two look like a good snack. That's the entire basis of this, but the crocodile does try to lure them in. I find that interesting. It says, what a surprise. Lounging in the depths of warm molasses, I know you seek a prize. These scars, they're deceiving, but I can help you. Play my game. Stare at the face of death, you miserable swine, or leave in shame. I suppose they start to walk back. The crocodile says, wait, come back. I cherish every little angelic creature in the... Ooh, wait, a snack. My mouth is dripping from a voracious appetite. So it started as maybe a way to trick them into staying so you can eat them, but then he just becomes quite open about it. We have a section here that I'm pretty sure is from the Fox and the Bird's perspective. It says, hold on. We'll play your game. We've come so far, we cannot give in. There's the instrumental break. Lots of things are going on there and lots of noise and stuff. Then a spoken word section. Take the tooth. Just reach in and take it. You have to reach in and take it. You'll die to save everybody. You just have to take the tooth. You have to play the game. I'm curious, the next track is called The Bird. Who had to die to save everybody? I don't think either of them did. The outro, the spoken word outro, is my tooth. Get back here, you mewling pieces of fodder. Plural. What a pathetic waste of meat. You'll be sorry you couldn't have had a quicker death, you filthy cowards. So maybe it was just a pep talk there in that bridge saying, yeah, you might die, but it's for the greater good. So they get his tooth and run away. And that's that. Not a lot more going on there. So let's dive into the bird. See what's happening here. Reminds me of a light drizzle raining down on leaves.
I hover on you, thought we'd reach the sun, but we try to preserve what we knew of love. I collect the colors of your heart and take them to the
That jump into the falsetto, so good.
what you dream of. In desperation, I hear you dream.
Dude, the precision here too.
Spirits, please, the rain, will you return to us from the whole?
That's the chorus from The Bear.
Please, I cannot bear this weight. Don't take him away. The clouds, oblivion sounds. Whatever way you go, it's not right if it's not with me. From the earth we're grounded to, all the way up to the blue. I know I'll see your face again, the truth you'll never leave. Collect the colors of your heart and take them to the end. I can hear the rain. You whisper quiet as you fade away.
That just might be my favorite track of the album. Absolutely gorgeous writing and emotive delivery, lush production, fantastic layers. The growth is just phenomenal in that track. The way that we kind of move from this, I don't know, cold introspection into warm confidence, maybe, or confidence is the wrong word. Confidence still feels right. It's just, I need something more nuanced. That's like a very broad idea. I need something a bit more specific there. But there's a fear in this. There's a melancholy. And it has to happen. I mean, that's the hero's journey, is that they must experience failure, and we haven't yet. And with just 2 tracks left, we need something. And I feel that here. And I think there's a lot of elements of isolation at the beginning too, as it's just the vocalist and the guitar for a while. We eventually get an electric guitar in the background that kind of, it starts off mimicking like birdsong with the vocals, and then kind of develops into its own thing before the rest of the band sweeps in behind them and we get this grand finale. Maybe it is, I don't know, a fear of being alone again? It is just called the bird. The fox is gone at this point. The melody line is beautiful, though. That leap up into the falsetto and then slowly dwindle back down across those, they're like jazzier notes. I don't think it's something you would find in jazz in particular. It's like jazz and pop kind of mixed, but I mean, so many of them are notes you don't typically find because don't find in popular music because they come from key combination. I guess it's not the notes themselves, it's the intervals of the notes that you just don't hear as often. And it just comes across as so emotionally evocative, but it's also the precision of that walk down too, the precision of spiking into that falsetto as well with as much power. It isn't an airy falsetto like we've heard in other parts of this. There is air to it, but it has more presence, more physicality to it than we have previously heard in tracks like The Fox and The Bird. And it's just, oh man. Part of it is the skill. It's the complexity of singing this part. But another part of it is it's just so dang beautiful, dude. Absolutely gorgeous melody, and the vocalist kills it. But then we also have the chorus from the bear popping back up, and that's got a big leap in it too that I really like. We don't do the leap into the falsetto though on that third syllable, which is interesting too, because what does that imply? We make the interval jump, but not by an octave like we had done previously. It doesn't have the full force and power behind it. Is that a feeling of defeat here? Singing the melody with less effort, less force than previously. Felt like a demand. Now it feels like a pleading, a begging. Assuming the words are even the same either, I don't know. There's just so much to love about this. And then for it all to grow as large as it does at the end to fall apart again. The end of this track is wind, a field recording of wind, I think, and some humming, and then not humming, but not like human humming, but like the hum, a low end hum of something. And light little instrumental stuff. I mean, presumably the next track is The Mountain. We're done. The journey's over. We got to transport this stuff and ask the spirits to bring the water back. So, what could this track be about? Lyrically, narratively. Let's dive in. I'm going to assume that the bird has been killed somewhere here. At least that's the title of this track. We have somebody hovering over the body of another, saying that I don't want to go on without you. Please don't take him away from me. I can't do this alone. It doesn't really say who this one is or why they're dying. I can only assume that it's a culmination of the battle with the bear and the crocodile. It says, collect the colors of your heart and take them to the end. What you dream of in desperation, I hear you gently sing, spirits. Please, the rain will you return to us from the holy mountain. But someone, please, I cannot bear this weight. Don't take him away. From the earth we're grounded to, all the way up to the blue. I know I'll see your face again. In truth, you'll never leave. And I can hear them take him to the end. I can hear the way you whisper quietly as you fade away into my words. So this companionship is over. One of the animals died here. And it's left a remainder shaken, trying to have the courage to proceed on and being overwhelmed with these feelings of loss, which, yeah, that's not where I thought the story was going to go. Much like how in the bear, we don't really get to see them acquire what they need to. We don't really see them taking this fatal wound in any of this that would have led to this, but I have to assume it happened off screen somewhere. What is the equivalent of off screen for a concept album? Had to happen out of earshot? That's dumb. All right. Let's continue on with the next track, The Mountain. I love this little, it's quiet, but it's just constant movement from the guitar. All that in one breath, too? Alright, this one I can get behind. Rising intensity, anxiety, being chased by something. Every time the vocalist hits a note and then resolves upward, it's so good. And it's peppered all throughout this album.
You would remind me of the gentle breeze in the trees that brought us feeding.
The reverb of the vocals, like ripples on water. Oh, there's even little water drops. All right. Yeah, fantastic finale. The bittersweet catharsis there of both having finished the journey, but also finally dealing with the grief of the loss. You didn't have a lot of time there between the crocodile and heading up to the mountain in order to do that. You just kind of had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And to really have that mixed emotion there at the end, I thought was explored really well within the vocal delivery and the music, each one kind of supporting a different part of this. where the vocals were certainly broken and destroyed. Very introspective. Some brighter movements harmonically, but vocally just very wiped out. Probably both from the loss and the journey combined. But musically, it's resolution. It's calm. The rain is back, and we no longer have to deal with this drought. We can go back to living with plants that are surviving and being hydrated. It's a somber feeling of completion. It isn't a big victorious parade or something upon returning home, but it is finality. And I think that's the perfect way to wrap this album up. Now, The Mountain. I don't know what's going on here. I can't wait to get into the lyrics because I assumed that we would have all the pieces we need, we would commune with the spirits, and this would be some sort of ritual-esque song, or maybe one of a little bit of uncertainty of trying to figure out how to do this whole process. That's not what we got. We got an incredibly driven, anxious song that felt like something was chasing us. And of course, we did have Elizabeth reprising her growls here, and I picked up a couple of lines that were something like, you can't run from me, you're a coward, or something like that. And the idea of the fox being chased by whatever this is was certainly felt in the music, the chaotic jaggedness of it, the lacking of a plan, just constantly snapping to whatever the next thing looks right to do, the next place to hide, the next place to jump. The next time that you feel you can look over your shoulder without, running into something or tripping over something. It's all about these split-second decisions in this high-tension situation, and the song does a phenomenal job of leaning into that, except for the couple of cases where everything slowed down and it felt like it was a bit more introspective. There was a section in the bridge that felt like the fox was talking to themselves and trying to give themselves a pep talk, and it finished with something like "get up on your feet and run," and then this really big finale on the word "run" as the vocalist just shouts it out. And that was a phenomenal segment right there. Absolutely loved that. The theatricality of it was incredible, but also it's this feeling of not giving up, which is something that we explored in the bear, maybe it was the snake at the very beginning of the track, though. It was something about giving up. What was the word in particular? I don't remember what it was, but giving up was the temptress that you must meet head on. You can't give into it, but you can't ignore it either. You have to recognize it's there and actively choose not to go down that route. And here, I don't know what the context is, but it seems that they kind of feel like maybe they should give up. They've already lost a friend, possibly, and what's the point? And then they convince themselves to get back up. Now, the track does end there, though. I'm really curious what the narrative of this is, because the song seems to end with "get up and run." And then after that, we have the mourning and the celebration or the recognition that the task is complete in the rain. We never actually get to see the spirits, which is interesting. I can't wait to see what the story is here, unless I missed something musically, but The Mountain is very straightforward. It's very jagged, very genty, lots of polyrhythmic devices, very aggressive and angry, some crazy guitar riffage, crazy piano or keyboard riffage. There's shouting, there's screaming, there's belting of vocals. It is high intensity. And the more that I look at this album, the more I see this pattern, I still think the best tracks are on the first half of it. Those are the ones that I resonate with most, and I don't think it is a coincidence that they're also the least metal. I'm really excited to dive into their latest album, which came out sometime this month, I believe. It was recent. I've been, like I said at the beginning of this, I've been stoked to get into it. But I have heard they've gone back to a more prog rock side. I'm not a big fan of the metallic stuff here, which is interesting because Elizabeth Hull and Martin Gonzalez, one of the guitarists for this group, do both also have a project aside from OK Goodnight that plays like alternative metal. It's Atomic Guava. That doesn't sound, yeah, that is right, Atomic Guava. I don't know why that didn't sound right when I said it. And I generally really love everything they put out. And that's definitely on the metal side. It's the writing in here is kind of similar. I mean, Martin Gonzalez also has his solo stuff. We've checked that out in the past as well. And you know, this type of metal, I think, is right up his alley. It doesn't sound unusual for him. The composition in here is very familiar to me. But I just don't find it to be as expressive as the more whimsical rock stuff and kind of folk-leaning stuff that we saw at the beginning with tracks like The Raccoon and The Fox and the Bird. And, you know, later on even, the Bird, that's still my favorite track on this album. Having heard all of them now, that's my number one right there. It's just narratively, emotionally driven. It's perfect in the story it's telling. It's perfect to listen to. The build-up, all of it is just so good. It never really devolves into, I don't like to use the word devolve because that's negative, but it never shifts into the more melodically simple but rhythmically and textured, more complex metal writing that we see across this album. And I do think that something like The Snake is a really good middle ground. I think it does a great job of having more of the metallic aggression without losing that melodic expansiveness that we have in the first half. That's not to say that I think the back half of the album is bad. It's just a very different flavor and one that I find is just personally, subjectively, not as much what I love as what we explore in the first half. With that said, though, the pacing of this is really well done. If you look at these tracks, there is a general escalation throughout. We start off with a less intense sound generally, and by the end of the track, we have the bear, the crocodile, and the mountain pretty much all back to back to back, incredibly intense musically. I mean, all three of them are about being chased, being attacked, being threatened of some sort. The music does a great job of capturing all of this, and the general intensity of the mountain is, I'm pretty sure, a peak of this song, of this album, as far as like tempo and harmonic anxiety are represented. So we do have this general growth, but it's also highs and lows. We have the Nightmare, which is pretty intense. We have the Snake right before it, which is pretty intense. But then we have the Falcon, which reins things in a little bit. And then the Dream, which really bottoms out the anxiety. Then we hit Bear and Crocodile, which are both intense. And then we hit the Bird, which kind of brings the energy down a little bit. It is a downer track. Emotionally, it's heavy. But atmospherically, that's one of the lighter ones. That takes us into the mountain, another peak, and then the rain, another valley. The general rising and falling on this album is just crafted so wonderfully. I do think it's an album that's going to unlock itself with more listens, though. I'm not sure it's as deep as I originally thought it would be after the first couple of tracks, but I do think that there is still a lot of, I don't know, a lot of sediment left to get into. I don't have digging metaphors. I don't know enough about the layers of geology in order to have a good metaphor there. I apologize. I'll be more educated next time I attempt this. Let's Let's hit some lyrics for these two, and then we're going to wrap this one up. So we have some crows. It says the crows were watching, talking, taking in the scene. Blackened holes for eyes that tear the spirit to the spleen. He knew that all was lost as his limbs begin to cave. He reached a speed so quick, just as his will it all but gave. So the fox is trying to hasten this. He feels his body falling apart. This quest is going to be the death of him, but he must continue for the sake of the land and everyone who lives in it. We got to get this last piece to the spirit so we can get some rain. It says, closely follow a crooked path, interweaving until I collapse. Trust my heart with a blinded lens and a twisted reflection of how it ends. Then Elizabeth comes in, your blood, fresh drawn intoxication like wine from a fount for my desire. You have never known this barren land of bitter frost. Your brittle throat at any cost is my reward after years deprived on the highest cliff face. Spineless morsels lose the fight. He says, none of y'all ever come up this high. This high up in the mountaintop, there's snow, it's cold, and there's barely any food. Y'all don't come up here, you don't have any need to, and I just rest up here waiting for anything. I'm starved, and you're dead. We're looking at some sort of carrion here, probably some sort of vulture, possibly, which does line up with the prophecy. The last was a creature foul as death himself. Then we have the chorus, which is fight or flight. I'm going to assume they picked flight. They run away, and Elizabeth comes in and says, you hear me? Nowhere left for you to hide, you coward. I can smell your fear. Then there's this chaotic cat and mouse, crazy music stuff that goes on. The bridge below me is erupting like the home I left behind. There is no spirit who could give me back the home that once was mine. I tried to reach the sun, but all I touched were your burning bones, what I wouldn't give to just survive. Both the carrion and the fox say the word survive. Neither of them are surviving well within this climate, but the fox realizes that the myth was just that. It wasn't some sort of prophecy waiting to be completed. It's just a story that got passed around. There were no spirits. There's no way to get the forest back to the way it was. There's no way to magically bring rain back. It says, never has a place been so close and yet so far. And if you were here, maybe all would be still just for a moment. You would remind me of the gentle breeze and the trees that brought us here. You would tell me to pick up my feet and run. And so the fox runs. And wrapping this up, we have just a few lines. Now it hurts. To earth I'm bound, a pain that's drowning all the forest sound. Strength lies within, it lifts me up. I made it here, my friends, I hear it now. The rain is soft as you. But is it you that I hear calling out? And this is interesting. The fox dies, and something that I probably should have made more connection to with the bird's death might not necessarily have been a wound from the fights with the bear and the crocodile, but the continuous malnutrition and malnourishment of these animals. Maybe even complete dehydration. I forgot how scrawny the bird's wings were all the way back in track 2. Here, once again, the fox is on his deathbed, not because of many battles, though the vulture did notice the fresh blood. but because they just haven't had a chance to find nourishment. He says he lays down, he's earthbound. I think that's a fantastic phrase. Technically, it's to earth I'm bound, but still, the idea isn't the concept of death, which I think is very interesting. I don't think the concept of death shows up at all. Like the word, well, actually, I suppose the raccoon did mention that a creature foul as death himself. But every time we have talked about a creature dying, it has been the phrasing of being back with the earth, going back into the ground. It's the cycle of life, not necessarily some sort of cosmic idea of life and death. I really like how that is consistently represented in this album. But it says that he feels content. He made it here to be with his friends, to be part of the ecosystem. Once again, he thinks he hears rain, but then thinks maybe it's just the bird. And then it ends. And it makes me question, what did we hear at the end? We had a solid 50 seconds of rain. We had the pitter patter of raindrops during the vocal section. But if we are seeing this from the perspective of an unreliable narrator, and I would say that somebody who is on the edge of their life, literally their deathbed about to die, maybe they're not the most reliable person to be telling us about their experiences with things around them. Their mental capabilities are failing. I don't think it really matters, though. The idea here is that at least they feel they're back with their friends. And that has me wondering about the story as a whole. If this is allegorical, what is it supposed to be about? It's not the traditional hero's journey, because they don't actually complete it. The downfall that I was expecting in the bird ends up being in the mountain, the final moments of this track, of the album. Instead of having a big moment of failure that causes them to doubt themselves, and they overcome that and end up saving the day or whatever their task is, the fox and the bird fail at the end, and that's it. That's not the way the hero's journey typically goes. And I think that's pretty interesting on its own. Just because you feel like you're the hero of the story doesn't mean you are. But I'm still kind of curious about everything else. It's fine if this isn't allegorical, but I'm still lost on the rage the snake brought up and the other person who needed a feather that the falcon brought up. Not a single other track in here really went in that direction. The nightmare and the dream are interesting tracks as well. I think it would take another listener to fully understand them beyond the surface ideas that the nightmare is a pretty nightmarish soundscape and that the dream is a pretty dreamlike one. But what is their point within the track? Are there musical components in those that pop up elsewhere? I picked up on the chorus of the bear reprising in the bird, but does that happen anywhere else with any other ideas throughout this track? I feel like this album still has a lot of secrets left for me, and that has me excited for a second listen on it. But as far as first-time listens, reactions, analyses, thoughts, whatever you want to call these kinds of videos, these are mine. For OK Goodnight's The Fox and the Bird. I'm going to be completely honest here. It took all of my might not to repeatedly call this the bird and the worm. And I think if you'll go back and listen, I frequently called the duo the bird and the fox rather than the fox and the bird. And it's It's because I kept wanting to call it The Bird and the Worm, and I corrected myself at the last second. For those who don't know, that is a very popular single from the band The Used, and easily one of my favorite tracks from them, and one of the most theatric. But I'm supposed to be wrapping this video up, so let's do that. What are your thoughts on this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Throw all of that and anything else you'd like to into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, is a link for Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. We will be doing a live stream, unlike last week where I had to cancel that. But we're definitely doing one tomorrow. If you can make it, I highly suggest you do. It's a very chill, laid back 2.5 hours of music discovery. It is a blast, and I enjoy doing it every week. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.